Hey everyone, Tom Seymour here from VHS Master. I figured I'd just do another update. For those who are new to the channel, what I do is I talk about independent films and how to make them and distribute them and market them. And sometimes my videos are a little inspirational, but I try to add some utility to the stuff I'm talking about. I tend to talk about a lot of the films I'm working on because that's kind of the best way I can talk about, how to get a film off the ground and how to make it and distribute it and all that stuff. So one of the cool things related to filmmaking is that so I started making films, believe it or not, in the late, like 1999 was the first time I shot my first, directed my first 16 millimeter feature film, right? So it's been a long time. But I managed to keep making films steadily. I make, they're called no budget features, but essentially my films are under 20 grand, let's say. The documentaries usually, I'm spending like a few $100s to make those, So, it's fairly low budget stuff, and anyone can do it. They really can. If you want to make a feature-length film and get it out there, you can make it happen. So what is interesting is I'm sure a lot of you out there are fans of The Last Drive-In with Joe Bob Briggs and Darcy and John Brennan, that whole gang, Yuki. And so that show really had championed a lot of low-budget films. Some were from the 70s and the 80s. I played in the grindhouses. A lot of them we discovered when the video store era came along, and so the Last Drive-In really concentrates on films like that. They even did some no budget films like Sledgehammer that were shot on VHS and stuff like that. Really fascinating stuff. And I think they got a little pushback from that because that's not the most marketable thing to talk about, But they recently, a few months ago, John Brennan from Last Drive-In, who I worked with a few times at Troma, he directed this segment on the VHS Massacre Blu-ray release. There was a whole introduction video, and I worked with him on that, and Lloyd Kaufman. And then recently we have a new documentary out called American Expendables, which he participated in. But he put out a tweet basically saying, "Hey, look, if you do this, this is to all the Mutant fans, the fans of The Last Drive-In, which I consider myself one for sure. I said, if you sing along to the song and shoot yourself on video and submit it via email, and we'll send back an approval, then we'll they didn't actually say what it was for." It was a surprise, but they just said, if you're a big fan of The Last Drive-In, sort of trust me, sort of thing. And I really had to think about it because I was like, well, I don't know exactly what they're going to use it for, but heck, if they're getting if they want your permission, then, maybe it'll actually get on The Last Drive-In. And it occurred to me, like, man, life's short. I don't have that acting bug or performing bug that much anymore, or goofing around and on camera. But I was like, okay, I'm gonna go ahead and do this. So if you're looking at the segment here, these are all these cameos for this song. So the song is called "You're the Glue." It's all about the love the fans have for The Last Drive-In, and the love for the Last Drive-In team that they have for the fans. So it's a very sort of sweet moment. And I pop up, this thing goes on for a while, but I pop up, I think, about 4 minutes and 30 seconds in. And what's wonderful about it is those people who are really dedicated to The Last Drive-In and really kind of follow the social media, like they're the ones who probably spotted this and participated, And so they get to be on The Last Drive-In, incredible on Shudder, So I thought this was really a sweet thing to participate in. And so the Last Drive-In, it's very interesting there's a mild overlap between Trauma Entertainment and Last Drive-In, because a lot of the personnel, a few people went over to the Last Drive-In, and it's really interesting. I interviewed Joe Bob Briggs maybe about 6 months, I think, before he got, or a year before, I forget the exact timeline. We interviewed him, I think, in 2012 or something like that, when he didn't have a show. And so there's an interview with him where he's saying, I don't know if I'll ever have a show because of the way that television's changed, you know. So those were in the VHS Massacre documentaries. Those were no-budget documentaries that we did. It's basically interviews and B-rolls, and that's about basically the end of the video store era, including Blockbuster Video and all that stuff. And we were actually the first ones to do that, that sort of end of Blockbuster thing. We started shooting in 2012, I think, and film came out. That was me. I just popped up. And so then, you know, VHS Massacre 2 came out. And we actually got on this thing called Shudder's Mid-May Massacre. And that was our film actually streamed on a Shudder-sponsored Mid-May Massacre event. So that was another weird overlap that and we did did the Q&A with Joe Bob and Debbie Rochon and Lloyd and all that stuff. And then... also, on the Last Drive-In, they've actually name-dropped a few of my films over the years, which is pretty amazing. Basically their first special, they mentioned a few films I worked on, and then basically this is the end of the sixth thing, and I'm able to just sort of pop in there as a cameo. So I'm oddly coming at it as a fan, you know, even though there is some overlap with it. I guess that's the one thing I'd say to independent filmmakers out there is just pay attention, and if you're a fan of certain films and all that, independent films or shows like this, you know, keep an eye on the social media, because every now and then opportunities will pop up, contests will pop up, places where you could be on the show could pop up, and it's definitely worth, keeping track of people who you think are good characters, who you met and you think are good people, and seeing what they're up to. That's basically it for the Last Drive-In. I was definitely happy to be part of that. And hopefully they'll keep doing more seasons. You know, you never know. That's John Brennan right there. Very cool. Which leads me to American Expendables. So John Brennan was... long story is that this American Expendables project, I had an idea for a doc and that died. And years went by and I started a new project called American Expendables with the same name, and it came out of a podcast that I did. So that's something as an independent filmmaker you can understand, is that you can make documentaries that evolve out of podcasts. That can be a form of pre-production, right? You can find some films that you were involved with or that you made, or that films that you just like, do some podcasts, and that will force you to do some research and investigate some films. So that's what I did with Tim Kulig and I. We investigated these films from the North American Pictures catalog. The reason we wanted to do it is that Troma acquired this catalog of films, and at the time, Troma carried several of my shows, VHS Massacre 1 and 2, and even the series I did for them called Monster Kill. So, basically, they let us use some footage from that catalog, and so we put together this documentary. It seemed like a good opportunity, and so it sort of, there was some really intense editing for a couple of months, and then when I finished it, I was talking to Debbie Rochon about it, because she had helped produce. And I was like, you think Troma would take this? She's like, yeah, probably. So we submitted to Troma, and they actually couldn't take it. It was too late in the year, and they had all their releases laid out, and so we're like, okay, we decided to relook at the doc, do some improvements, some re-edits, and prep it for release through MVD. Because we were just thinking it could be, I thought at its best, it could just be a thing that pops up on Troma Now and maybe people enjoy. But we beefed it up a little bit, and so we went with this company called MVD, and they recently put it out. Now, the thing that I sort of want to communicate to independent filmmakers is that, like, there are times when you think you're... My career is inverted in a way. I used to make narrative feature films primarily. Films like Land of College Prophets or Len and Betty, Mark of the Beast, comedy, adventure, horror, all sorts of stuff like that. And we would shoot the film, cut the film, test it, show it to people, friends and family, strangers, recut. We'd work over about a year to get the cut where we wanted, and we put it out. When I was younger, I used to think, this is brilliant, this is awesome. And now that I'm older, it's the exact opposite. Almost everything I put out, I think it's garbage, and I have to be convinced by friends and family to go ahead and put stuff out. And then this one, and the last one, VHS Massacre 2, James Richardson was like, man, you are really down on this doc. You really don't think it's any good. He's like, you need to worry about it. It's solid. Just don't stress about this. And I put it out, and that was actually, it won 23 awards. Like I said, it got around everywhere. The VHS Massacre series, when people talk about an overnight success, that's kind of what they mean. Like, for me, it took until I was well into my 40s to have those two films, a hit big enough that they were on Peacock TV, and like I said, the Shutterman Massacre and Prime and all the, you could stream it almost everywhere except like Disney Plus maybe. And that was my overnight success, but that took, well over 2 decades, 20 something years. And it was, I think, my 10th feature-length film. VHS 2 was. VHS 1 was the 9th. So it took that long to either learn what my niche was and what I was truly good at, or the culmination of the experience came to that. I went back to college during that time, because when I was young, I could only go to community college, and then I jumped into the job market. So I didn't go back to college to get my BA and then my MFA, until I was in my 40s is when I finished my MFA. So, which I'm not saying that had any effect on my ability to make films. That's highly debatable. But the point is, you have to make a lot of work in order to get good at this stuff. It doesn't happen magically. There's a few people like that. There's a few people that, well, like even Quentin Tarantino, he did a film before Reservoir Dogs that he admit was not good. He directed it. It was not good. Eventually it came out, but he wasn't a fan of it. He knew it was like his training ground. So even him, it took him one feature-length film, and then his second actually is Reservoir Dogs to get good, have the right people around him and the right budget, all that stuff. I never got the right budget, but I just kept working until I found the right niche, which is essentially special interest doc. Although I did do, I'll talk about a narrative feature that I put out last year. So it takes that long to get good. And there is this story. This is not my story. Another streamer talked about this the story of the potter. So there was this teacher, and they were teaching a pottery class, and one class they said, okay, I want you to make one perfect pot by the end of this semester, one perfect one. And that was one class. In the other class, he said, I want you to make as many pots as possible, do as many as humanly possible. And the question is, which one do you think made the better pottery? And the answer is that the people that made 1,000 pots, their last pots were the best ones. And the people who made one perfect one, that was less quality than the ones that the people who made 1,000 pots. You may have this feeling like that the art you're doing is not good enough, but I think the only way forward is to make that art, put it out into the world, and take your medicine. Listen to what people say. If they trash your work, if they like your work. If people are trashing your work and they keep harping on this one thing, rather than shy away from it, like a lot of the Disney Plus shows do, when people, one of those shows like The Acolyte, they point out something, the fan base, like 20,000 people point out what they perceive as an error, and the Acolyte people say, like, you're idiots, don't worry about it, or like you're trolls or whatever. As a no-budget filmmaker, I listen to that stuff, so I have to. So you can't listen to every comment. That doesn't help. But what you can do is, if a bunch of people say that, hey, this is an issue in your film, then maybe you go ahead and fix it. And here's the key. Sometimes their diagnosis is right, but their solutions are not good. So you might get a comment, I don't like this character in the film. You should do X. And that idea is terrible, but they did diagnose the problem right. Okay, I'm not going to take your solution, but what I'll do is I'll change this. I'll cut this character out. I'll move this around. So you have to come up with your own solutions, but testing films and having people react, that's important. And the thing is, like, does it still mess with my ego if someone says something bad about a film? Yeah, someone just said something bad about VHS 2. But by now, I mean, the kind of the verdict is in. Like, it's just been out for so long that, it really doesn't matter anymore. The important thing is to just keep going. That persistence, be the potter who makes 1,000 pots. You will get better. Just look at me. It took me maybe 20 years to do something of note, that people like New York Times. I'm not trying to brag. I'm just trying to say, like, where I came from versus where I am. New York Times reviewed both VHS Massacre and VHS Massacre 2 about the decline of physical media, and great reviews of both. Okay, when I was 22, the New York Times, which was a big deal to get in the New York Times back then. That was still, like, incredible. They called my work unfortunate backwash. So it took several decades to be perceived in that. But the thing is, I wasn't looking for that. That's the weirdest thing about that. I was making these special interest docs that no one in their right mind would think that the New York Times would be interested in it. There's no profit motive, first of all. I don't, putting these things out through Trauma, there's no advantage to the New York Times covering Trauma movies. Trauma's not buying ads, and, they're not part of the studio system, So anyway, it gets interesting in that way. Okay, so some interesting news. So this doc called American Expendables, it is about direct-to-video action stars. Like Cynthia Rothrock and Bolo Young, Billy Blanks, and it stars John Brennan from Last Drive-In, Debbie Rochon, Lloyd Kaufman, James Richardson, Tim Cooling and myself. And so this was a project where I when I finished it, I didn't have a ton of faith in it, but I was convinced. Tim actually said you should do more festivals. I was thinking of doing one, and he backed it, and I was like, fuck it, let's do it. And the crazy thing is that American Expendables has won 6 awards so far, including the highest award at the Telly Awards, which is the gold. And the gold is very hard to win. I think the Telly Awards are very important. It was started in the 70s as an answer to the Emmy Awards. It dealt with small market broadcast programming, everything from documentaries to commercials to marketing campaigns. And the criticism is that they give out a lot of awards, but I'm sorry, like the opposite of that is something like the Academy Awards or the Emmys, where 5 fucking people get nominated when there's a lot of great work out there. So the Telly's is based upon merit of the individual work, and that's when they're awarded. That's why you see multiple people win awards. There's nothing wrong with that. And the great thing is that independent filmmakers like you and I can enter the Tellys, unlike Emmys and Academy Awards, which are closed. So anyway, so 6 awards so far. This one, Impact Docs, I actually like this one. It's an online contest, but it's cool because it's specific of documentaries. But then it also won at the Independent Horror Movie Awards, which was kind of a big deal, and it's going to have a screening at Anthology Film Archives in Manhattan. That's another piece of advice too. If there is this thing called New Filmmakers New York, and if you enter through Film Freeway, if you enter New Filmmakers in New York and you get in, and they're pretty chill. They they don't. You have a good chance of getting in, and then your film will screen at Anthology Film Archives down on 2nd and 2nd Manhattan. Serious New York City movie premiere. It's wonderful. So that's something to consider. That's another thing I've done with independent filmmaking is I've really embraced the film festival circuit. We were always so poor when we were doing these movies, 10-15 years ago. It'd be 3 or 4 of us chipping in some money just to enter a few festivals. We get into like 1 or 2. But the reality is you have to enter at least 30. We've gone as high as maybe 50, I think. But I'm real careful about how I spend money too. So it helps to have a partner, and Tim and I will chip in, and we'll figure out a way to enter 30 festivals. But we're real frugal finding deals. And also, to be honest, I steer away from the top 10 film festivals for the most part. Sundance, Slamdance, Tribeca, those are not really film festivals anymore. Those are just a PR tour for studio films. They barely sell anything in those markets anymore. They're not really festivals. So it's funny because I used to work with a lot of cinema snobs, and they wouldn't consider any small film festival legit. They'd only consider the top 10. I consider the top 10 not legit. But that being said, I have won at the San Francisco Indie Fest, Another Hole in the Head. I won at Chicago Horror, Montreal Requiem, Vancouver Horror Show, World Fest Houston. It goes on and on. Not to brag, but I'm saying you can win at you may not get into the top 10, but you might find the better festivals are not the top 10. Sometimes the better festivals are ranked top 25 or top 50, but the crowd is better and there's cooler people there. Or it's a genre festival that can't be something like Chicago Horror probably is never going to be Sundance because it's horror. But that doesn't mean it can't be a big deal, So, and it is. So just consider that. look for things that might fit your film. Smaller is better sometimes, you know. So I think that's cool. So American Expendables. So people ask, like, I got some messages like, "Oh, how did you get your movie on Tubi?" Sometimes in a nice tone, sometimes in a bad tone. How did you get this on Tubi? It really is. You really cannot. It's very unlikely that you'll be able to do it yourself. It doesn't mean you need an agent. It doesn't mean that you need a manager. I've never had any of those. The most I had in the past, there's been films that I've worked on that had a producer's rep. They've tried to maybe sell it. But with the films I've mostly directed, I have been able to find distribution companies myself. I've been around long enough where it's easier for me to just approach these companies, and it's sometimes possible. That being said, if you submit your film to a distribution company, they would then take it. If they're doing physical media, they would handle the duplication and all that stuff, and release it, or they would put it out in streaming. And so MVD did the distribution, and it's really cool. So the windows, you might be saying, how does this work? I think what they do typically is they would do the first maybe 3 months, or it's like paywall, right? So if you're on, so American Expendables is on Amazon Prime and Fandango and Google Play and a few others, and YouTube Movies actually. And so I think it's $10 to buy it. It's as low as $2 to rent it. And then after that, 2-3 months, it'll rotate on some of the free sites. It's slated to be free on, I think, Tubi and possibly Freevee. And then we'll see from there. Another couple sites possibly. But so that's great. And one of the things I can announce here is that we're working with a company called ETR, and we signed a deal to do a Blu-ray release of American Expendables, which is honestly wonderful. It's a dream come true, and I think it should be fine. And they actually they release their stuff through Vinegar Syndrome, which that's kind of like a dream come true. Like that's kind of what the cool kids like. It's pretty interesting that this documentary could end up going through there. Anyway, when I know more, I'll let you know. But so far so good. And so you might be saying, how do you make these films? Well, in this particular case, American Expendables, I traveled to Lloyd Kaufman's house. I sat down. I did an interview with him. We got some B-roll around the Trauma Studios, and a lot of the other things were interview based. James Richardson, Debbie Rochon, and Tim and I were in some of it too. You can. We got permission from Cynthia Rothrock to use one of her interviews, and it's possible if you get really people sort of invested in the idea of your film, like James Richardson, like he was able to actually take his camera and record his interview. I gave him questions, and so sometimes you can do it that way. So what you can have, Debbie did that too. So you can. Sometimes you can save a lot of money, not traveling and doing all this stuff if you can get people to. You could do stuff over Zoom as well, but you want to be a little careful with that because you want higher quality stuff. So keep that in mind. If you want to conduct an interview, online that you plan to use in your documentary, try to convince them to have their phone on some kind of, tripod or something, and roll on their own video separately while they're zooming, and then they send you that footage after, and it's clean. So, I think they did the Tiger King documentary like that during COVID. So anyway, they sent everyone iPhones and they did that way. Anyway, so I think that's one way to go. So you can construct a doc of that, but then you have to go kind of balls to the wall in editing. You really have to be an audience advocate and cut things tight and get to the meat of things, and don't bore your audience. Make sure it's a good watch, entertaining watch. It's very important. So if something's like easy to watch, entertaining, people can forgive imperfect footage. If you draw things out, things are too long, things are too loose, you're gonna hear complaints. Okay, so one thing is if American Expendables manages to be even mildly profitable, my bar is very low. I don't make any money off my movies. They always cost more. It's really the festivals that really puts it in a negative at this point. But if it's popular, even if it doesn't make money, if people really respond to it, like the VHS Massacre docs, I can actually see making a second one. And I was talking with Tim about this. There's another of we can pick a different catalog to explore. So it could be a good series, if people dig it. So we'll have to see. So far so good. If the festivals are any indicator, it's pretty solid. Okay, so if you were doing a narrative feature, okay, so there is this thing about streaming. And streaming is, you could say it's good and bad. I'll put this on for a second. This is one of my, oh look, Deadpool Wolverine. Streaming is good and bad, right? Obviously, the Cadillac of watching a film is it would be the theater, right? If it was a really nice theater, people were well behaved. But the next best thing to that is something like a 4K Blu-ray on a really nice television setup or projector setup, and then far below that is streaming. Streaming is the kind of thing where if you have to do it, you do it. But I don't begrudge streaming. I'll give you an example. So this is Exorcism of Fleet Marriage. This is sort of like a supercut of a film that was released in 2012 called Mark of the Beast. This has all new footage. It's got a totally new score by Tim Kulig. It's really a different movie, which is why I released it as Exorcism of Fleet Marriage. And this came out last year, I believe. So in any case, Mark of the Beast was a film that we put out on DVD, standard definition DVD. This is like 2012. That just made sense at the time. When we were putting out that film, the video stores were dying. They were dropping like flies. And I decided to start chronicling it. I was trying to chronicle the release of Mark of the Beast, but it ended up all the stores were closing. So it's like that was the birth of VHS Massacre, unbeknown, right? To me. So Mark of the Beast did not sell well. And it got onto the shelf at Kim's Video. That was the biggest crowning achievement. And then Kim's Video went under, I believe, the year after. So it was that kind of thing. And then when it went on to streaming, we did this thing with added grain, and we had this sort of tobacco color hue over everything, and people didn't dig it. It was at the time where people were starting to think grain was not cool. I always thought grain was beautiful, So for this time around, I took all the footage and I put it through degrainer in DaVinci Resolve and degrained it, but I did make it black and white, so it's a very different experience. And the one thing I'll say about streaming is that this film really didn't have a life as DVD. And even some of my biggest hits that were on DVD, like in 2005, this movie Land of College Prophets, which was in all the Hollywood videos and movie galleries, it did make some impact on streaming, but really the big thing was being in the video stores. But it's hard to know really what impact that made. I mean, it was sold in like 10 different countries. I don't know. So maybe a 250,000 people did see it. I have no idea. It's hard to track those numbers. But one thing is, with streaming, you can track numbers better. What I'm saying is, if a movie is on a shelf in a store, it's like, how many times does it rent? I don't know. But that being said, if you look at this, we released it. So the cool thing is, Exorcism of Fleet Marriage is on Tubi, it's on Prime, it's on Plex, I believe, or at least used to be, and some really cool streaming sites. So is it on Netflix? No, but I don't care anymore. I think it was 2005 the last time Netflix had one of my films on there. I don't care about them anymore. As well as Disney Plus. Disney Plus is a very specific thing. I don't really care about that. But Tubi is pretty awesome, and I think more people are coming around to that. But if this is any indicator, if you just look here, this is a cool thing. MVD licensed it to this thing called Horror Central, which is a gigantic company that has these large YouTube channels, and it's very interesting business model. But Horror Central, you got 160,000 views here, 4.3 here. You have 7,000 here. So this is just YouTube, and the stuff I'm just doing a surface scan of it, right? But it's about 200,000 maybe. But plus all those other streaming sites, I think it's very easy to say, the film has probably been streamed 250,000 times. Well, look, when we did a pressing of Mark of the Beast on DVD, I think we did a run of like 2,000, and I don't know. I'm not even sure it ever sold out the 2,000. It may have, just barely. But I think that's kind of the point of it, is that, it didn't, it wasn't a home run on physical media. So at least streaming can serve as a sort of, kind of how cable TV was. Like Joe Bob Briggs talks about the Beastmaster. And so he would talk about the Beastmaster a lot, and the Beastmaster really had its second life on cable. I mean, that's really when people saw it. And I remember seeing it on like HBO or something like that. I didn't have HBO, but we didn't have money for cable like that. But the neighbor across the street had HBO, so we'd watch Beastmaster over there. The point is that I will say, for some small movies, at the very least, streaming can give a second life to some of these, and that's a wonderful thing. So streaming is not all bad. There's some really sweet moments about streaming, and this is, I'm proud of. It's a film that I don't think it was finished the right way. I remember living in just a weird part of my life. Living in New York, renting a room out and trying to edit trying to edit Mark of the Beast on a very slow Mac, where it was very hard to even preview and see what was going on. And it was a basement room where, like I would sleep there. That was my rented room. And at night, when it was hot, you'd open the basement window, but the sand would blow in from the street. And I remember being a particularly dark part of my life. But I was still making movies. I was still trying to make a go of it. And that's something to know too. It's going to be lots of ups and downs, and you're going to say, how did I get here? But if you keep working, you can work your way out of it. And don't be ashamed to have a day job. It's okay. Everyone has to pay the bills. Streaming can be good. It's not all bad. But that being said, I think I'm going to do a box set of Exorcism Fleet Marriage with a number of other films. I will probably save it for this thing called Video Dreams. So Video Dreams is a documentary I'm working on, and it's about, I'm trying to describe what it's about. I used to call it, it's kind of like the origin of the middle class film movement, about when VHS became sort of, you could buy a VHS camcorder from the pawn shop. And so middle class people could kind of shoot movies and edit with 2 VCRs at home, and indie films kind of came from there, from that middle class perspective. But more and more I think about it, it's also about people whose love for the video store was so intense that they went out to make independent films of their own, to be more part of that. And the best metaphor I could think of is crawling into the TV. So my daughter, who's 5, she wanted to know how to crawl into the TV to be in her favorite cartoon. And I remember I had that thought too when I was a kid, and I thought, well, like every kid has that thought. Like, they don't know what it is exactly. They think they can crawl in, and I thought that was, that's such a wonderful, idea. And then I thought about it. I was like, well, that's kind of what the video store was. It was a physical place you can go with movie posters and standees, and a library of thousands of films that you could choose from and look at the box art. It was like a museum, and you pick the film out, and you were all in. You paid your $5, and you were going to commit to it. And that's definitely something that's been lost. You were invested in it, You were gonna, if you rented Deathstalker, you were gonna give it the best chance you could, even if it wasn't very good, So, anyway, so that's something I'm working on, Video Dreams. I might actually do a sequence that has something to do with this, at least explaining what this is. Yeah, it's been a fun journey so far. But who knows what will happen with American Expendables. If this catches fire, I can see trying to fast track something with a different catalog of films. With the documentary, anything over an hour is considered a feature. Actually, with narrative too, but the narrative films I've done have been as long as 92 minutes, something like that. But London Betty was an hour and 20 minutes. But a lot of the horror stuff has been like 70-something minutes, which is totally fine. It's still a feature-length film, and no one cares. If you think about Boris Karloff, Frankenstein, one of the best horror films ever made, it's like 72 minutes or something. So with narrative, I recommend getting over the 70-minute mark, just because I think it's going to be more fulfilling. But with documentary, really an hour is fine. Just literally get over the hour mark. like American Expendables has like 2 minutes of credits at the end, and it's like a 61 minutes, or something like that. So, that's all you need, really. I would just say to everyone out there, you can absolutely do it. You don't need even a particularly great camera. I would say don't shoot everything. Don't shoot on your phone if you don't have to. If you're doing a documentary, getting B-roll on your phone, I'd say go for it. That's fine. But conduct the documentaries with some kind of camera, mirrorless camera, Lumix G7 or something. You could probably get it for like $300 now. Get a camera with some good glass. You can either get really cheap wired mics or get a little H1 recorder for like $90. Get some LED lights. You can, you maybe spend $300-400, maybe $500. Get yourself a low end setup. A few LED lights, super light, portable, some kind of recorder for audio, even a mirrorless camera, Lumix with a stock lens, fine. It'll make all the difference. It'll make you feel more professional. Anyway, thanks everyone for listening, and we'll see you next time.